Hello and welcome to the Situation Report today. Glad to have you joining us, and it is awesome to be in the same room.
Yes.
So this is something we don't have often. If you're not watching, you need to go to our YouTube channel, look for the Situation Report. You can find our YouTube channel there. For those of you that are just listening, though, Chad and I are in the same actual room.
Yeah, this isn't a split screen. It might look like it with this, but look, I can reach across, touch you.
It's crazy. We've done so many interviews, and we've done a lot in person too.
Yeah.
But over the last 6 or 8 months, a lot of it has been remote because of the nature of travel and a lot of other things. So it's super cool to be together.
Too. We're here in Texas. We're building our national headquarters.
Yep.
And so some of our staff has been shifting around.
Yep.
You can't see behind the cameras. There are a bunch of boxes and stuff like that. We're just getting settled, and we're a temporary office,
yep,
which was supposed to be till September, and now it's going to be till
it got pushed back.
It's going to be pushed back. So construction. I'm not if you're in the construction industry right now, I'm mad at you.
Yeah, big shocker that things aren't coming in the way they're supposed to. But it's good to be together. And for those that do watch, if you've seen some of our recent situation reports, we opened up a new studio in California and in the process of opening a brand new studio here in Texas as well. So we're in the process of doing all that, but it's super cool to be together. And normally on this show, I start off with the tagline. This is the show where we give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. And that's what we talk about so often. Whether it's guests that we have on or Chad and I talking, we talk about cultural issues, things that are happening in our world. And we know that things are changing all the time culturally. Big stuff. I mean, we talk about China, we talk about gender, we talk about everything in between. There's so many things to discuss, and trying to navigate that and trying to understand those things personally, but also to understand those things as leaders in our homes and in our communities. We do our very best to navigate that. But every once in a while, we have a conversation that is I think important, but also a little more fun.
Yeah.
And today is one of those days. So today we are going to talk about extreme sports. Now, not trying to convince anyone to get into extreme sports, but trying to, well, maybe Chad will, but more in continuing to provide information and perspectives to navigate. These are decisions we need to make. And I think one of my life principles is decide to do things. So there are a lot of things that we can do. A lot of us have the opportunity to do things. This is not about convincing a person to do one thing or another, but to think about what you're going to do. Make decisions. Don't find yourself in a situation you didn't decide to get into. And I think that's very important. And when we talk about navigating culture, navigating the world, navigating opportunities, we need to have the right perspectives to do that. Today is one of those conversations.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm all for doing fun things and doing crazy things, and but it should be a deliberate choice, and, and it should be measured against where you are in your life at the time. Lots of circumstances and factors, from financial to assessing risk. To managing like your time and your priorities in life. There's so many, and that's not like constant, consistent measuring stick. It changes throughout the different phases of life.
We use that phrase sometimes in the Mighty Oaks programs. Is it wise in light of? Right. Yeah. And so, and that changes. But is it wise in light of your current family situation and so many other things?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of extreme sports, and I guess I would say extreme sports and stuff throughout my life. I don't think I'm an adrenaline junkie. People look at I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I fought professional MMA. I love scuba diving, spearfishing, skydiving, which I'm just getting back skydiving. I was I had just under 500 jumps. I was about to get my D license years ago, like over a decade ago. And then behind the cameras here is Daniel, who's one of our staff members and videographers, who has like 11,000 skydives. So he came on board, and I'm like, I gotta get back up there.
Someday he's gonna figure it out.
I'm like, I gotta get back up. I gotta get back up there, and with somebody that has 11,000 skydives on your team. And then my son, oldest son Hunter, and Hayden, they both want to get in skydiving. I'm like, I'm not gonna let them get involved and not be there with them to make sure they're doing things safe and right. So I'm back out there skydiving. So there's like skydiving, and then there's just all kind of doing the stuff in the ministry stuff we do is risky. And so I think measuring all those things out, making sure it's the right decision for me.
Explain. So talk about extreme sports. I mean, how do you decide if something is
extreme?
I mean, I just ran a 32-mile race in Big Bear, California.
That's extreme.
It's extreme, but it's not dangerous. I mean, people do have problems doing that, but extreme, and I think it falls into the category of extreme sports, but it's not particularly dangerous.
But dangerous is like is a measure too, right?
Yeah. I mean, is it more dangerous? But it's probably, if you measured it out, it may be more dangerous than jumping out of a plane.
Statistically, it probably is. I bet more people die on those races than people die skydiving.
So when we talk about extreme sports, how do you define that? How do you categorize that?
I don't know how I would, but I think in general, a generality of how people describe something extreme is something that's abnormal that not most people would feel comfortable doing.
Outside of the norm.
Outside of the norm, right? Yeah. When most people feel comfortable competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, locking themselves in a cage with another professional fighter and fighting, flying down a hill on a mountain bike, downhill mountain biking. Most people wouldn't do that. Jumping out of a plane, skydiving, that's not something most people would feel comfortable doing. Right. So that would be, I think most people would say those things are extreme, and so that makes it an extreme sport.
Okay. I think the sport part is important too, right? So sport means to me that not only is it extreme in the sense that it's not something normal people do or it's not normally done.
Yeah, bungee jumping is a sport. That's not a sport.
But sport would be something that's organized.
Yeah.
It's not like just you going out and jumping off of a big rock or something.
Right? Like,
it's not just something dangerous, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's calculated sport. And look, like, I think we'll talk a lot about skydiving today. Because I'm really excited about skydiving because I'm back skydiving right now. Right. And two, I think it's one of the best examples because it's one of the examples that it's a very organized sport,
right,
governed by the Federal Aviation Administration. Right. So the FAA has laws that govern skydiving. The USPA, U.S. Parachute Association, talks about like all the regulations. I just took my C license test yesterday, and I'm going to be getting my D license soon. So Daniel's got like a D license and all these other ratings, but like, so it's governed. It's a sport. There's rules and regulations and things to keep people safe. There's competitions and there's things that people work towards. It's safety wise, it's so much safer than people assume it is.
Yeah.
But but people look at it and they're like, wow, that's so crazy. People jump on an airplane. But I think it's not what people think, right? So I was saying earlier, people will look at some of the things I do and think I'm a drilling junkie, which that's not the case at all. I'm not at all. I was just talking to Daniel right before this, and when I go skydiving, when I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
right,
those are the two most relaxing things that I think I have to do. Like I'm more stressed out sitting in my house on the couch, and I mean this, like I'm not. I really like. Because I'm like, what do I have to do? What's next? Like I have, what's on my calendar? What's coming up? Like I'll get stressed out sitting there. When I'm on the mat grappling and I'm focused and present in that moment, I'm so relaxed.
Right.
I'm so calm and it's like so peaceful to me. When I jump out of the airplane and I'm floating through the sky and Daniel's like, hey, we're doing this technique. We're trying to do this drill and so we're flying next to each other. I'm like mentally present in that moment. I'm not thinking about you or Will or other people I work with. I'm not thinking about the next program or what's on my calendar. I'm focused in that moment. And that to me is like extremely peaceful and relaxing.
Yeah.
And so for me, like having those things isn't a charge of adrenaline.
Right.
But there's also the case that it wasn't always like that, right? I can't remember. I think the first time I did a free fall jump might have been 1994. I think that's when it was. Wow. And
you're pretty old.
I'm pretty old. That
was a long time ago.
Yeah. And I probably was pretty stressed out.
Right.
And when I jumped out, I'm sure there was a dump of adrenaline. Right. But over time, it became something a lot different than what it was then. Now it's something that's calming and relaxing to me.
As you know, our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Now Mike has done it again by introducing his My Slippers. For a limited time, you will save $90 on a pair of My Slippers. This blowout sale of the year won't last, so order now. Mike has taken 2 years to develop the My Slippers, and they are designed to wear both indoor and out all day long. Made with MyPillow foam and impact gel to help prevent fatigue, they are also made with quality leather suede. Call 1-800-870-0283, use the promo code SITREP, or go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, and use promo code SITREP. This offer will not last long, so order now with promo code SITREP at mypillow.com.
I think one of the important factors too in this discussion, and we can talk more, about principles for making these decisions, but one of the important factors to understand is when you're talking about the classification of extreme sports means that other people think it's extreme. Mm-hmm. But what's often missed is the amount of training and preparation that goes into doing something. So something does not become extreme because it causes you to have a physiological or chemical response.
Right.
That may happen. Mm-hmm. I've been public speaking for years, and every time, in the 3 or 4 seconds leading up to standing up, when I know my time is coming and I have to walk out there, I have a response physiologically. And often the response is, I want to run out the back, right? Mm. That doesn't make public speaking an extreme sport, even though it's something a lot of people are afraid of. So it's not how you feel that makes something extreme or not extreme, but the preparation that goes into something, even your first jump, although you felt very, however you would have felt, the level of training you went through before that first one, particularly since it was a military jump, was incredible. And so I think that has to be factored in when we're talking about extreme sports. Is it extreme or reckless? That's to me the line, right? Is it extreme or reckless? Well, the line between extreme and reckless is how much preparation, how much training, how much experience has gone into you getting to the point where you can do this activity.
I'll share a story. You haven't heard it before. So Justin, the guy, my childhood best friend, we grew up together. Justin Hemel, and there was another friend that with the three of us, Jeremy, and Jeremy was killed in a motorcycle accident a few years after this. But we were I was dead set from 13 years old that I'm going to be a recon Marine. I'm going to go in special operations. So I started watching these. They went into recon Marine videos. So I was watching. I was a trader watching these Navy SEAL videos. Yeah, and I'm like,
SEAls have always liked to get pushing.
They always had good videos.
They like the videos in the books.
So they had this one that taught rappelling. So we would climb trees and rappel out these big trees, and then we progressed from there to rappelling off of buildings like One Shell Square in New Orleans as teenagers. The gondola, which is like for the World's Fair that crossed the Mississippi River, rappelling off stuff like that. And then one time we were training and thought we were teaching ourselves the right way off these videos, and we those radio towers at night you see the red lights blinking.
Yeah.
And they're a couple of 1,000 feet high.
Sure.
And they have the safety cables that so we were like we're gonna zip line down those safety cables. They're pretty steep. They're like more than 45 degrees. So we went to Home Depot and got a bunch of stuff, and we made these harnesses and we climbed this tower in the middle of the night. And if you ever climbed to one of those towers, you're not supposed to, but if you ever did, they're like waving, right? You feel them waving.
So high,
And we went up to like the third level, which was probably about 400 or 500 feet. And we're like 16 years old maybe, and we both had harnesses on and we clipped on.
Sounds like we need to have a podcast on parenting.
Yeah, but if you're parenting, don't let your kids listen to this.
or be a good parent and don't let them do this.
Yeah.
Either way.
Well, my parents wouldn't let me do this, even though I didn't have great parents. They wouldn't have let me.
They would have drawn the line right there.
Yeah, so we clip in, and then we put these we had these cables and we put them over our feet around our ankles so our legs weren't dangling, and then we tethered ourselves to each other, and we thought we'd be able to. We had some welding gloves on, and we were gonna slide down. And it was just these carabiners on this cable was so gripping that we were hand over hand going down. And I remember my forearms like burning out, and I'm like, if we let go, we're gonna die. And the whole time that it was so loud, it was like, pew, you hear that people start coming outside. You see porch lights coming on. Because it was across the field, and all of a sudden this guy comes out and starts yelling, and we finally made it down and it took off. I can't believe we made it down and didn't die that day. And I think I thought we were prepared to do something like that. In my young juvenile mind, I thought I was prepared to do something like that. We were watching these videos and had the right equipment, but in these sports, there's real training. There's proper training. When you fight professional MMA, you have an athletic commission, and they're looking at your experience as an amateur fighter. How did you are you qualified to get in there? At the drop zone where I'm jumping right now at Spaceland Houston, which is a phenomenal group of people there, and great place if you ever want to go tandem skydiving, which I recommend everyone goes tandem skydiving. You go down there to Spaceland Houston and go skydiving, but when you go there, you do these 2 tandem jumps, and then you could learn how to become a skydiver. The training program that new skydivers have to go through is so regimented. They get so much training and skill that it really brings up the level of safety to where if something happens, it's usually not by accident. It's usually somebody's user error or somebody's fault.
It's not Keanu Reeves in Point Break. Just jumping out of a plane.
No. That would be pretty impressive.
That would be impressive. Yeah, right. So it's the training that goes into it that makes it not a reckless event, but rather, a sport, something to be enjoyed. What do you say to people who, a lot of our audience would be Christian people who would say, well, you shouldn't do anything that is needlessly dangerous. I don't think anyone would say, don't do anything dangerous, right?
Right.
But needlessly dangerous. If you have to drive your car, that's dangerous, but you have to. What do you say to someone who says, well, that's reckless, it's bad stewardship, it's needlessly dangerous, something could happen? How do you deal with that? And I have my own thoughts on that.
I definitely know you have your own opinions on that. And that was one of the discussions I really hope to get to with this, because I think that's a really important question.
It's an important question.
I mean, God gives us one life.
Right.
He wants us to be responsible with that life.
Right.
And then during that life, he gives us responsibilities. I have children. I have grandchildren now. I have one that's around coming out any moment now. Maybe we'll get out of here and we'll find out I have to go to the hospital. But those are things that I'm responsible for and I have to be around for. And there's an organization that we run. I have a lot of responsibility in my organization. If something happens to me, you guys will go on without me. We built the organization that way, but it'll impact the organization, and there's people I'm responsible for.
Sure.
So every decision I make of what I'm going to do professionally, recreationally, should be weighted that. Like, is it worth the risk to go out there for fun and go skydiving, to go get on those mats and have the chance of somebody picking me up and dropping me on my head and breaking my neck, to go skiing behind a boat, like everything. You should assess those risks. I think it's a fair and important thing that everyone should do. But I also think that God didn't create us to sit in a corner and be safe. He created us to be adventurers. That's why we have the desire to do things. It's in our heart to be adventurous and daring and do things. So there's a balance in there, what's reckless and what's not. Now, people I'm talking about the next phases for me with skydiving. Like, I feel like I made that assessment for skydiving. I feel like I'm gonna not push myself to limits that would be risk adverse. To me, just jumping out of an airplane is not that limit. There's different factors, right? What type of jumping am I doing? How low am I going to open? What kind of equipment am I jumping? Daniel over here jumps a 65 square foot canopy, which is a little bit bigger than the size of my iPhone. I wouldn't do that. Me, for me, that's not worth the risk, because it's not something I desire to do, to go faster in my canopy. And maybe one day I will, but right now, that's not something I want to do. I want to be safe. I'm interested in flying wingsuits. And somebody said, oh, you mean over the mountains? No, absolutely not. I know that if I move my hand 1 inch, I move 30 feet. And that could be at the side of a cliff. I'll jump a wingsuit in the sky, but I'm not jumping it next to the ground. So I'm measuring all those things and making those decisions.
You remember, you said wingsuit. It was years ago. We were in the Royal Gorge doing whitewater rafting.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And there's a
base jumper.
Yeah. Well, there was someone who had just been killed, and there was I forget if that is, a bridge or something over the Royal Gorge. You go under it.
The Royal Gorge Bridge.
And one of them just misjudged it and put himself right in the side of it.
Yeah, that's wingsuit jumper.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, and then you got base jumping.
Here or there, just an anecdote.
Yeah, and biblically, Jesus was tempted to base jump without a parachute by the devil, which is I'm being
that may be a bit of a stretch.
It's a very much of a paraphrase, but some people say you look at something like that and people would say, well, the devil tempted Jesus to jump. He did tempt to jump off a cliff without a parachute, right? So the devil basically said, throw yourself to your death. And see if God will send angels. And he said, do not,
He said, throw yourself and prove that angels will come and save you. Yes.
And Jesus' response?
He responded with Scripture.
What was that though? Do not tempt the Lord.
The Lord thy God. Yes.
So is the things you're doing, that's the question I want to get to. Is the things you're doing tempting God? I don't believe it is, because I'm not jumping out of a plane without a parachute. I'm not jumping out of a plane without having somebody check my gear and inspecting my gear. I'm not going to be reckless. I'm going to be safe. I get my gear, I inspect my gear, I look at how all the things that there's a post-packing checklist that you do before you jump. You go through all those things before you jump out. Hey, Daniel, check my pens one more time. If I was being reckless and just putting it in God's hands, and I would, God's got it. I'd be tempting God. So I'm being wise with those things.
Right.
So I think that's a factor. Now there's another side of it that I think doing things that are risky and doing things that are dangerous, and this isn't my adrenaline seeking side, but something about it brings me closer to God. And I don't know if that's a healthy thing or not, being honest. But something about me brings me closer to God. Like when we were out in Ukraine and going to Afghanistan, there's a stronger spiritual sense inside of me to be like, I need to be close to God right now because my life is at risk. I'm taking extra risk. And so,
there's just an awareness, an added awareness that you're not in control.
Your mortality, you're out of control, you're in God's hands. And I'll say, like, there's no safer place. If you're in God's will and you're in a close relationship with God, there's no safer place on the planet to be than in God's will, whether you're in the jumping out of an airplane or in Ukraine when they were getting bombed or on your couch at home, right? God could spare you in a situation in Ukraine, or he could take you home while you're sitting on your couch. So that is in God's hands. But being reckless, I don't think is just doing these sports. I think being reckless is being reckless. And I tell you, like sometimes on that plane flying up, and I got a lot of jumps. I've done some crazy jumps, especially in the Marine Corps doing military free fall jumps. But every time I go up, I feel like a Catholic saying like, I'm like saying out the Lord's Prayer like 20 times. Like, if I had a rosary, I'd be burning through those beads, man. Like,
right. Yeah. So and again, there's a difference right there, right? Even in that illustration that you gave, if you as someone who, is a professional level skydiver or whatever, you've done this enough, when something's not right. So you can cross the line from from sport to recklessness when even though something's not right, you continue to go. A great example of this, a lot of people know Alex Honnold, who free climbed El Capitan, and crazy story, incredible documentary. But the story of that is he trained for like 3 years to do that, started the ascent, and like a third of the way up said, this isn't going to work, and turned around and came back.
And waited a year.
Because he's a professional. So the difference for him between, I would say all of it was reckless, but recklessness and extreme was he as a professional understood there's a line and I've hit that line. And so I'm not going to push beyond that. This isn't safe anymore. This is beyond my capability for one reason or another. And so I'm going to back out. And I think, it becomes reckless when you do. You use the phrase tempt God. When the only thing that's going to keep you safe is the miraculous or supernatural intervention of God.
And that's tempting. That is tempting God. And if you're, again, I'm not encouraging anyone to do these extreme sports. You got to use the same decision-making process that we're talking about. But if you do, if you choose to do these sports, these aren't like hobby sports. I could go out and play golf and be terrible at golf every day and never take a private lesson. The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to break someone's window. Right. So, but this isn't one of those you play around. If you're going to do it, then do it right. Get as much education. That's kind of why I'm doing it with my boys. Like if my boys are going to do it, I want to be there with them.
Correct.
I want to make sure they're getting the best education. They're making good decisions. They're watching me. I bought a parachute rig yesterday. I didn't want to spend that kind of money, but I'm like, I'm not against used equipment, but I'm not going to buy used equipment. I'm going to get the best. If I'm going to do it, I want the best stuff that I'm going to have. I want the best training I'm going to have. I want to move it at a safe progression. Like be intentional about it. Don't just like, I'm going to just start skydiving, or I'm just going to start doing MMA. I'm going to be intentional. Like, by the way, MMA is not a recreational sport. Like, you don't go out and fight.
Like,
Like MMA, like, somebody's going to beat you up.
Go into a garage somewhere and get involved and fight.
But you got to take these things seriously.
Even with that, I think taking seriously, MMA, let's just say jiu-jitsu, there are good schools and there are not good schools. There are great instructors and there are less great instructors. So if you're starting something like that and you want to learn and progress without it becoming a reckless, hopefully I won't get hurt, you need to put yourself under someone who can actually teach you the right way.
Jiu-jitsu is one of those things that drives me crazy, right? Someone will look at starting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and like, I really want to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then they'll go into a bargain shop. They're like, look at this school, and this school's $125 a month, and this one's $150. Like, why would they charge $150? I'm gonna save $25 and go into this one. And like, man, that's not a place to bargain shop.
You get what you pay for.
And by the way, you probably spend like an extra $25 on coffee in a week. Like, don't base. I'm not saying I don't know people's budgets and stuff like that, but don't base it off of that. Base it off of the quality you're gonna get, and because you can really get hurt doing these things, doing these sports.
Well, all of us trained, but my kids trained, your kids trained, but putting my daughter particularly, who's, Molly, she's 14, she's training, a couple times a week again, and she started when she was 6 or 7 or whatever it was. I mean, when you're thinking about what that involves, putting, a child oftentimes up against an adult or someone bigger or someone a little more reckless or less coordinated or whatever, it becomes dangerous when the wrong person is doing the equipping or the teaching. Yeah. And so that's what you're saying is it needs to be a wise decision. Put your people, whoever your people are, or yourself in the very best situation possible. I think a lot of this for me, when I think about anything, not just sport, is understanding first of all primarily that my job, my role, my place on the planet is to be and do what God wants for me. Mm-hmm. So if I put myself in any position that prevents me from being what God wants me to be, then it's not the position I should be. Now, that coupled with, I do believe God puts within our hearts the desire for adventure and the desire for, excitement and all of those things, and I think that's right. I think it's important even as a tool to relax, to be, as you said, closer to God, to learn and to grow. All those things are so important. So letting fear drive you and then saying, well, I'm being a good steward is lying, right? That's just stupid. Yeah. And in fact, I think guys, particularly men, should put themselves in positions that are uncomfortable, that are difficult. I think that's why jiu-jitsu is great. I think that's why a lot of sports are really good. I have nothing against team sports, but there's something about individual sports where it puts you in an uncomfortable spot where you have to push and you have to succeed. And I think that's really important for men particularly. So I think God has given us those things, all things to enjoy. I think we have the opportunity, again, factoring in safety and all the things we just talked about. But the baseline has to be, will this thing that I'm doing, whatever the thing is, I think this is true with nutrition. We talk about food a lot, nutrition. Will the way I'm treating my body, the things I'm putting in my body, will those things keep me from fully being what God wants me to be? Yeah. If there's anything in your life, a relationship, a sport, a hobby, food, anything in your life that will prevent you from fully being what God wants you to be, you need to cut that thing out. It could be watching too much Netflix, right? Well, whatever it is, that should be the standard.
I think living in fear is also in disobedience to God. God doesn't want us to live in fear. God doesn't instill a spirit of fear in us. That's a fear that comes from the enemy to stop us from moving forward in life and doing things. In Mark 4:40, which is a verse. Not a lot of verses on skydiving, and I'm not saying this one is, but Jesus is, all the disciples are like freaking out because it's a storm, and they're panicking and asking God for help, and he's like taking a nap, and he wakes up and he's like, and he says this, he says, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" Right? Like, why are you so afraid? Do you not trust that I'm in control of your life? Like I have you in the palm of my hand, and I think that's one of the things. Again, we don't tempt that. We're not reckless with that. Right. But do we live our lives in such fear that we're like, God's not in control? Like circumstances are in control? Yeah. I need to be wise. I need to, make sure my equipment's right and our training's right and I'm intentional about being safe. But am I going to be, knees chattering in fear? Right. Or am I going to trust that God has me in the palm of his hand? Don't live in fear. That's not a easy thing to do when you're honest. But it's something that we should strive towards. Yeah.
What do you?
I think it also goes with beyond ourselves too. As a parent, I really have experienced this, especially when Hunter went off to deploy to Afghanistan. I remember you and I talking about this. Like, man, I am terrified. My son's going to Afghanistan, a place that I lost friends, a place that I've been through those things. Like, I'm terrified of that. But then I had to come to the realization that, do I trust God or not? Does God not love Hunter more than I do? Yeah. Is he not more capable of protecting my son more than I am? Right. Of course he is. Yeah. And so being able to relinquish that, and there's such a freedom in being able to relinquish those fears into the hands of God.
How do you deal with, and I know your family pretty well, so I don't know that you deal with this, but how would you counsel someone to deal with the fears of other people? So, let's say, for instance, Kathy was deathly afraid of you skydiving and said that every time you said, "I'm going to go jump," which is not the case. It's just hypothetical. But as a husband, as a father, maybe you've got kids that don't like what you do because it scares them or whatever. How do you process that? I mean, again, I have an opinion on that, but how do you process that, or how would you help someone to process that?
Well, there's two things. One, I'm part of a family unit, especially with my wife. We're one.
Right.
So I would try to let her. I would try to bring her to the same understanding I am. I would try to like lead her into the same understanding that, hey, you don't know as much about skydiving as I do, but let me tell you about my experience. Let me tell you what the risks really are and what they're really not. Let's have a clear picture of what we're talking about here, not just blind. It's not just jumping out of it and the parachute's not going to open. That's what I was like. What if the parachute doesn't open? That's not typically what happens, right? So let's get the facts.
Although there are some videos you can find.
It's user error mostly. Make sure we're on the same page. We're having a rational conversation about what the reality of it, and then go through the spiritually. Like, is this something that God would be for or against? Let's go through it honestly, and I have to be objective myself. Right. And then, but then if all that still came down to a point to where my wife was still not like 100% like, okay, I get all that, but I don't want you doing it because it just really, I would have to make a decision that, hey, we're both one, and this is a decision we have to make together, and maybe it's something I just couldn't do. And I think you got to be willing, especially if you're married, you got to be willing to lay down things you love sometimes for those that you do love.
Sure.
And that's not easy, right? Because
that's good.
And then if my kid, like, who didn't understand, I should have more understanding with them. My kids are like, I'm having anxiety. Like, I'm having panic attacks because you're going to do this sport. Do I really want to drag my kid through that so I can do a sport, right? Am I being selfish now? That's not be the answer that some people want to hear, but you're asking me how I would handle that in my family.
Well, I think part of that goes back to what you said at the start, is that this changes over time. Phases and stages of life change that process too.
Why did it have over a decade and a half gap in skydiving? I love skydiving. I was approaching 500 jumps when I stopped last time. I was just getting into really enjoying it, not being like Marine Corps ruins everything. We did fun jumps in the Marine Corps.
Camping's not fun anymore.
But when you're jumping at 36,000 feet, which sounds super cool, at night with night vision goggles with hundreds of pounds of gears on you, and of course they're going to do it in the winter time because why would you want to do it in the summertime,
because
right?
It's the Marine Corps,
at the same time's amphib package, right? So like it just wasn't always fun. But I got to where I was actually really enjoying skydiving, but I stopped. Why did I stop? Because I had made this decision that, hey, my kids are young. If something happens to me right now, I'm going to have a single mom at home that's going to have to raise my kids. And the sport was a lot different back then. The death rates were higher. There were a lot more accidents. Back then, the equipment was different. I think the sport's really changed. I've been watching that as I've been getting back into it, and I'm like, man, this is actually like, I just seen this new system on my rig that I ordered. They have what's called RSL, Reserve Static Line, and that if you cut away your main parachute because it's a malfunction, you pull your reserve. Before you even pull your reserve, your main parachute's out for the RSL. But now there's this new piece. It's got what's called a sky hook. So I got a sky hook on my new rig, and it's so much faster. It gives you about maybe like 400 extra feet. That'll open like 400 extra feet faster. And it's like little things like that. There's so much more technology, and I'm like, you look at the accident ratios are like so much better, and the training's better, and the equipment's better. So I'm like, and now my kids are out of their home. They're all married. For me, it was okay. I could come back now. I feel okay with it, and Kathy's okay with it, and my boys are wanting to do it. So it's just a different phase of life.
Yeah, that's good. I mentioned Alex Honnold before. I heard an interview with him not too long ago, and he and his wife have a baby now, and things have changed in his life too. And he even talked about that. Like, I'm not going to do that anymore because of the family that I have. And it's not that he can't, but again, it's a phase of life. It's a stage of life, and I think it's important. And I think it's great when you look at anything in life, again, principally, you need to take your family along. And I think this is where a lot of people get it wrong. This is why they create enemies in their family, because they want to go do something, some activity or some event or something else, but they don't bring their family along. So a spouse raises an objection and you just blow past the objection because you're sure this is what needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
Well, the right thing to do is understanding year one and then walking them through that. And kids are the same way. But on the flip side of that, I think a spouse needs to be open to listening and understanding. And even though they may be scared or afraid or nervous or whatever,
you can lead them through that fear.
Lead them through that. And even if they don't fully get it on the other side, there needs to be something in them that says, but I trust you. And I trust that you're doing the right thing.
That's probably where Kathy's at right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably every spouse.
The other thing, this happened the other day. I was looking at buying this piece of equipment, this parachute rig, and we were with the guy, the sales guy there, Vulcan. Daniel was the one who introduced me to him, and we're talking, and he's like, and it's pretty much decided we're gonna buy it, but I'm like, hey, let me go home and talk to my wife, and he's a funny guy, so he's just joking. He's like, all these tough guys, now you gotta go home and talk to your wife, and great salesman. So,
So you just bought it. So you handed him your credit card.
Yeah, no, but me and Kathy are on the same page with everything financially. We talk, but that wasn't the main reason. The main reason it wasn't a financial question. It was like, if I buy this
is an investment.
Parachute, that means I'm gonna start jumping more. And this is I'm not buying it for next month to jump next month. I'm buying it for the jump the next 15 years. Yeah. Right. Because and that piece of equipment lasts probably that long or more. So like that was the conversation. It wasn't like, hey, can I get your permission to buy this? Again, we're on the same page financially. Yeah. We make decisions together on that. But the main thing was, is this something we want to invest in my time doing? Is this something that's okay with you? That was the conversation. Yeah. Not more than actually purchasing the parachute.
And that's walking your family through that and letting them have some buy-in. I think so many people get themselves in trouble because they just don't let their family have any buy-in. Yeah. And any input. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a SEAL Master Chief buddy of mine who bought a parachute and he didn't want his wife to know, so he bought it with a government credit card. Didn't go over too well with the command.
With the government?
Yeah, didn't go over too well with the government.
If you need to ask your wife, you definitely need to ask your CO. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. So
he's the kind of guy that never gets in trouble for anything, though. He talks his way out of it.
He talks his way out of it.
He talked his way out of it. No, I just grabbed the wrong card.
Oh, sorry about that. Then he had to talk to his wife, though.
Yeah.
So extreme sports, this is one of those conversations that is fun, but I think there's so much involved in the conversation that just applies throughout your life. Making the right decisions, because it's not just about jumping out of an airplane or doing any of the other things we could talk about. It's about evaluating, why do you do the things that you do, and how do you enjoy the things that you enjoy, and when does something become reckless? And that something could be a lot of different things.
I think we talked a lot about this, about the angle of like risk and should we do it, but there's so many benefits that come from it that I want to talk about too. Like,
and that's the enjoyment, right?
That's the enjoyment, the pleasure, the peace that I talked about that I get from it. I mean, the closeness to God of it. I mean, maybe it sounds silly to some people that I say that brings me closer to God to be doing dangerous things. But I mean, I could tell you that in the last year, the closest I've been to God was in the middle of the Afghan evacs, flying to Tajikistan with me and Dennis. We're going to swim in Afghanistan past the Taliban. Yeah. Getting back into skydiving, like all these, because I'm having to lean on God more. I'm having to trust God more. I'm wanting to make sure, I mean, for me, like it's a spiritual. It is a spiritual thing. It works in my relationship and puts my mind in the right place. I was in my discipleship group with some men from my community last night, and one of them was really struggling with just having peace in his life. But he's like so busy all the time. He's he's a CEO of a large company. He travels around the world speaking. He's a very high productive guy. You look at him and it's like just crushing on success. Yeah. But he's like, I just don't have any peace in my life. And he doesn't. But he has no personal hobbies. He's like, man, I would love to be able to go out and go skydiving. I'd love to be able to go out and have a sport like jiu-jitsu. I'd love to be able to do those things. I'm like, and I think just overall balancing your life and creating margin in your life, you have to have those times for yourself to be able to just unplug, be present in the moment, and enjoy whatever it is you're doing, whether it's extreme sport or something. I just think I think the thing about like these extreme, we definitely kind of categorize extreme sports. What it does that other sports don't is it allows you to be mentally present in that moment. Right. I you and I both like running. You like running, but when I'm running, I'm like going through my calendar. I'm planning a business. I got a new opportunity. My mind's like going right.
That's the problem. Run further. All you'll think about is running. I promise.
So my mind, for me, my mind's like when I'm if I go swimming, even because I like to swim laps, my mind's thinking right. Yeah. If I don't golf, but if I go golf, I'm sure like I'd be talking, having conversations. We'd be talking about work, maybe. We'd be talking about family. Yeah. But when I'm on those mats and grappling, that's it. All I'm thinking about is that moment. When I'm skydiving, all I'm thinking about is that moment. Every second counts. Yeah, every second counts because every second is 200 feet. So so I mean every second counts. So like I'm just so present in that moment, and you unplug from everything. And that's very healthy to do.
I think that should be the goal, right? I think
anything that you do should be something that can be used to draw you closer to God. I mean, I think that's the purpose of recreation. The purpose of recreation is to create enough space in your life so that you can, hear the word of God and you can focus on God and you can think about God. Not everything pushes you that way, but I think when it comes to just hobbies generally, even if your hobby is shipbuilding in a bottle or whatever, people do all kinds of weird stuff. If it becomes an addiction, you have to do that, then it's no longer a hobby that's allowing you to have a closer relationship with God. It's become something else.
Idealistic.
But when your motivation is to put you in a place where you can think more clearly and understand, God's word in your life more clearly, that should be the goal. And I think if you're chasing adrenaline or you're chasing a thrill or you're chasing something else, you're in a dangerous place.
Yeah.
But if it's about sincerely being in a place where you can unplug from what you're doing and all the things you just described, I think that's the right motivation.
Yeah,
that's good.
I don't need any more adrenaline, to be honest with you. I've had enough adrenaline. I've had the seasons where I take medicine to stop the adrenaline.
Yeah, right.
So I don't want any more adrenaline pumping through me.
And learning new things I think is helpful too. I mean, there's a lot of good certainly that can come out of it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we dismiss the good for the perceived danger when it's really not as dangerous as people think it is.
I think people have a lot of problem with I've had people, both Christian people and people who are like high productive people come into jiu-jitsu and they look at how complex learning jiu-jitsu is. And you're like, why would you spend like hours learning this one move? Like, it's such a poor investment of time. You could be learning something like more productive, right? Why would you spend hours learning how to do a certain particular, drill in the skydiving?
Yeah.
Why would you spend that time doing that? Well, it's an exercise of the mind, right? You might not need to do that. It might not have any life practicality, but it's an exercise of the mind. And it's okay to exercise your brain and learn things.
And things outside of your normal life.
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah. A lot of good stuff here. We could talk about this for a long time, but go do something extreme. You'll be happy that you did, but do it with the right people. We'll
show a video. We'll plug a little skydiving video in here.
Okay.
Maybe some B-roll.
Sure. Because 1% of you will be interested in skydiving. So
I'll plug Spaceland Houston again. They're just such awesome people down there. They did one day. They took we had almost our whole staff go tandem, and so if you go
tandem's good.
Yeah, tandem's good.
You don't have to think about anything.
All you have to do is
you just get pushed out of the plane.
It's just you can even just close your eyes and hang on. And but yeah, tandem's good. I mean, not only would I recommend it, it's the way you have to start, right? So everybody has to go tandem.
Yeah.
So
tandem's fun. Yeah. Very good. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure that you subscribe. Don't wait. Do that right now because you're listening right now. So subscribe right now, and then take some time. Go over to our YouTube channel. The Situation Report on YouTube. You'll find us. Hit the notification bell after you subscribe so that you know when the content comes out. Leave us a comment and share that out. If you're listening on whatever platform it is, if it allows you to leave comments or ratings, please do that. That'd be very helpful to us. Really appreciate it, and we will talk to you next time.